All right, so this is our main website page. It kind of goes over the different products we have. We have it broken down into different categories: alarm systems, water pro, water protection items, power posts, control switches, pump switches, control panels, busy monitoring, which is our cellular, Wi-Fi, Zigbee products, and then also our legacy products. Excuse me, I gotta take that out. So our legacy products is any of our old products that we still want to give you the documentation for in case you have some questions on it. So if you click on that, you can, go to some of our older legacy alarms or control panels and get whatever information we have on that. We have a lot of configurators. And here's our legacy tab here. Just click on any of these, you can see all the different things. It's kind of highlighted red here, and then if you click in there, say obsolete effective date, we can still go in and click on any documents over on the left here, look at the pictures, things like that. Just go back to the main page. So for alarm systems, we have our standard indoor alarms, and we have 1 zone and 2 zone available with that. They come in a small package like that. We have an indoor wireless alarm, which technically is a wireless float system. The float is connected to the yellow transmitter, and that transmitter transmits a signal up to 1/4 mile away to the alarm, which has a receiver on it. So that float, if you don't have, winter time, you don't want to go underground and bury cable for your control float to sound the alarm, you can send that wireless signal just from the float action to the alarm. We have our indoor-outdoor 1 zone alarm, and that looks like this. There's terminals in here for incoming power. This is voltage specific, it's 120 or 230. And you have your float connection, and then also auxiliary alarm contacts. So if you wanted to tie it into a building automation system, you could do that as well. And then we have our outdoor alarms, and we have a couple options with those. Those pretty much all of them have auxiliary contacts built in, and then you can get them with floats or without floats. And that one we have 1 zone or 2 zone available. And this is all enclosed. Brought a sample with, and I'll take it out of the box. Just so I can pass around this other one too. So our Versa Alarm 4X is 4X rated. Everything's enclosed. We have a buzzer on the side. Capacitive touch for silence. LEDs light up on the outside. Green when you have power to the unit and the system is normal. And if somebody doesn't like those green LED indicators, you can actually turn that off. Just hold down the test silence button for like 30 seconds. And then it'll flash at you and it'll turn off. And then alarm condition, if it's a 2 zone, you have zone 1 and zone 2 on each side. Or if you have both zones going off, they'll both flash. And this one has 9-volt battery backup terminals here. So you just stick a 9-volt battery backup. So if you lose connection for your auxiliary or your 120 volt or 230 volt power, then your battery will keep your alarm active outdoors. And then you can get it with optional terminal blocks here. So if you wanted to bring separate incoming power for single phase simplex pump, and then a pump float, and then your pump connection there too, you could get that as well. Pass that around. Has a lockable latch. And then go back to the previous page. Yep. Stay on the website. And jumping back and forth. All right.
So on that wireless alarm,
this one,
yeah. Can you send a pump signal, pump run signal through that?
So you can if you have like on the contactors here, they have a auxiliary port, so you can just connect that to the transmitter instead.
Yeah, to run signal.
Yeah.
So is the transmitter in the float unit then?
So the float connects to the transmitter and we send it out like that, but I mean, we do use these. The yellow transmitter is a product from Banner Industries. We buy it and hook our float up to it and resell it. It's kind of pricey, but all of our new panels, our Check-Its and Flex, will have that type of technology, and you want to need that type of sensor because it's all built into the board here. So there's a little module here for either Wi-Fi, Zigbee, or cellular. So this panel can talk to a hub in your house or business or whatever. It would be basically the same thing. But yeah, if you did just want that little transmitter, then you could put that in an enclosure or wherever. It is a 3R rated, I believe, or possibly 4X, so it can be outdoors. And then you need a transmitter that would just hook up to one of the inputs. So yeah, it could be done just for that if you wanted, or you can now build it into the panel. We have option codes, which I'll show you in a minute. And then we have next up our indoor Wi-Fi alarms. So we have one zone Wi-Fi alarms and one zone Wi-Fi with alarm panel only that does not have a buzzer hole. You'll see that second one over does not have that black hole for the buzzer. So we call that the notifier. And that is good for like Airbnbs or cabins or something where nobody's going to be there to hear the buzzer anyway. It'll just send you a signal, either a text or an email telling you what the issue is, but you won't get a audible annunciation on local sites. The LEDs will still light up on alarm, but you know it's not going to bug your renters if you're renting it out or whatever. And both of those have AA battery backup. And then our 3-zone Wi-Fi alarm has a rechargeable lithium-ion battery included with it. So that's an added bonus for that. It's just a little bit more. And then you have 3 separate zones. You can hook up different things to it. You can do a high-level alarm, your sump alarm. You can hook up our water spotter pucks to it. So I can open.
So is that an app based on your phone?
Yeah, app or website. We have both. There's a web page that you can go directly to and view your status and that. And then the 3-zone one also has a built-in temperature sensor. So you can actually set up low temperature and high temperature alarm thresholds. So that's good for like this area, you know, when you get freezing temperatures, if your furnace quits working, I'll just leave this cable up here, but let's pull this apart. And you can see this is a 3-zone Wi-Fi that has a battery backup included and temperature sensors. So you can set those different sensors up and program, you know, if it goes below 48 degrees or 45 degrees, you can get a low temperature alarm, so you can get an early warning notification. Hey, the furnace is off, come and fix the situation before your pipes freeze. Or maybe if it gets too warm, you get a notification for that. Maybe if it's in a cooler or something, if the temperature gets too warm, you get a notification. And then of course all your other sensors, normally float switches. Then we have one specifically for our Power Post platform that just has a different label. It's basically the same thing as our Visi alarm, 1-zone on the left with a different label. It just tells the customer that it's a septic alarm because Power Post is designed for septic. And then we also have our Visi Hub indoor Wi-Fi panel. So the Visi Hub is used if you have a panel that has either cellular or Zigbee that can transmit out in the field up to 1,000 feet away, and then you have a hub inside your building that communicates with the Wi-Fi. And then go back page.
What is Zigbee?
Zigbee is like a long-range Wi-Fi, let's say. Zigbee can go up to a couple miles. We rate it for 1,000 feet just to be safe, but technically you can go like 2.5 miles with it. It's kind of like that Banner transmitter that has about the same range, but Banner rates theirs to 1/4 mile. So we're rating ours to 1,000. With ours, you can do a mesh network as well for the panels or the alarms. And you can actually hook up 8 of these in series, so you can have one panel 1,000 feet away from your hub, and then another panel 1,000 feet away from the second panel, another panel 1,000 feet away. So you can be like 8,000 feet away and still get, data connectivity. And with all of those, you can get pump run, you can get amp draw, you can get elapsed time, event counts, high level alarm, low level alarm indications.
You have to have wireless service in each location.
Just the hub. Yep. Your hub would either be connected to cellular or Wi-Fi. And you have to specify that on the configurator. All right. So Visi monitoring, if we jump to there, we have all those indoor alarm products I just showed you. And then we also have this new Visi notifier control panel. And we have 3 different ones. We have a 4 input model. And actually I have an example of that up here. So that has this OLED display and a dial that I'll pass around. You guys can play with a little bit. I don't have power to it, but you can mess around with the knob. It's a dial system and with a push button as well. It has the same function as a flex here. So if you wanted to see that in action, you can actually come up and see how that works up here. But this is a Visi notifier. And in here it has 4 inputs. You can connect any 4 inputs. You could do, make your connection from your contactor here, or from a float for a high-level alarm, or auxiliary contacts. And then this would send the alarm signal out wirelessly. So you can get Wi-Fi or cellular notification. So we have the 4 dry contacts, normally open or normally closed. And then we have another model that has 11 inputs. And the one with 11 inputs has 8 dry contacts, 1 analog input, which you could use a 4 to 20 milliamp signal on it. And then 2 of them you can use for ammeter input. And then we also have a 15 input model. And that one has 11 dry contacts, 1 analog input, 4 to 20 milliamp, 2 ammeter inputs, and 1 dedicated power loss input. And this one you can have battery backup on as well. You can input a 12-volt battery backup in there, motorcycle battery. So some options with that, and with those.
That battery backup will power the whole panel?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Our WaterPro protection items. I didn't bring any samples with that, but we have our V series, which is a little control panel and a valve and then a hockey puck sensor that you put on your floor. You can connect multiple sensors to your alarm box there. And if you detect water up to 1/16 of an inch, it will actually automatically close the valve. So if you do have a leak and you connect to the city water, it turns off your city water supply to prevent flooding. And then our next one is a WaterPro well stop. That one is designed to connect to your well system, your pressure switch on your well. Set that next to your well tank or your pump area down in the maintenance room. If you detect a leak with that, then that'll interrupt the signal to your pressure switch, cutting off your well pump, so it's not going to continuously pump up water and flood your area. That's a simple push button reset. And then we also have a sensor that connects to a VFD. So it just goes to the digital inputs on your VFD. If it detects water, it shuts down the VFD. And then we have a couple different accessories and then legacy items there. Control switches, we have a few different control switches and attachments. Our new control switch is our Ultra control switch. You can use this for up to 5 amps, and it's 120 or 240 rated. Bare leads, always bare leads for control switches. So you can use that to activate the contactor to turn on the motor or the pump, or for alarm situation, connected to the alarm. And about 2 years ago, we started releasing our UltraFloat, and then we've also now on our 5th generation of that, always making tiny improvements to make them like the best float on the market. So our first generation of that, we had it and tested it for almost a decade and got it UL certified. And then once we got them into production, we just started to have a couple little issues. So then we went back to drawing board on that little issue, and we think we have it all solved with this model here. And this is the one that's shipping out currently and has been for a few months now. Haven't had any returns or warranty issues on it at all. And then we also have high temp control switch. So the high temp is denoted by the yellow cable here. We have tested this in boiling water and in our oven up to like 350, 400 degrees, and it still tests out good. We tested next to competitors, and in the oven, the competitors is melting. But even in boiling waters, ours works. We can only rate it to 212 degrees because that's what the cable's rated for. But I can tell you it does work in higher temperatures than that. And then we have our cast iron cable weight here. So that is good for like car washes where they use high temp water in there. Out east, they have a lot of steam pits, things like that. Probably not a whole lot of applications here, but if you ever run into a situation where you get high temperature water or something, boilers, things like that, you can use that in there. And then we'll over a couple of these attachments here, or accessories. Here's our plastic cable weight. The clip fell out somewhere. I have to grab another one. Just a standard cable weight, I guess. We do have the stainless steel pipe clamps, and then we also have what we call our rubber locks that replaces the stainless steel pipe clamp. It's made out of EPDM rubber, so it's very versatile, resistant to chemicals, heat, light, everything. There's a notch in here for your cable, so it goes around your discharge pipe or your float tree. Put your float cable in here, like that. Then you just cinch it down. There's a couple little purchase points. There you go. Tighten it up. That's our rubber locks. Reusable, easy to use. Float tree bracket. If you get this, you get a couple little clips that pop in here too. You just put the clip around your cable, and then you can adjust it wherever you want, and it just sits there, and you bolt that to your riser or your concrete wall or whatever. And now your float is set. In a situation like this, you would have either plastic or cast iron weight. So you have a pivot point somewhere halfway down in the tank or the pivot. Oh, I don't think anybody wants to pass this one, do they? Piece of, no. What's next? Go back and go to the back again. We do have liquid level probes if you ever need a liquid level. So those would work on our flex panel for water well systems, things like that. And then we go to our pump switches. We have a couple different varieties here. We have the high temp. We have a standard control pump switch, which is this one. This is our Rely On. You can get this in 13 or 15 amps. It's a little bigger. All of our new floats are made out of polypropylene, so they're more buoyant. That's why they're smaller than some of the other competitors. They have non-stick properties. They're more resistant to chemicals in the septic tanks, things like that.
Anything with an NSF rating?
We don't have it, but polypropylene is approved for NSF. We just haven't paid to get ours NSF rated. If we would pay the money, it would pass. Just trust us.
So what's that model number then?
That would be the Rely On. I mean,
Is
the
that
R13 or R15. And then, and pretty much all of our switches here, if you go into it, you can click on, do you want 13 amp, 15 amp narrow and wide angle, pump up and pump down, or do you want the RS series, which is medium and wide angle, 13 amp only, or do you want the RL, Rely On Large, which is 15 amp only. So if I pick this one happens to be the Ultra Float. So in the Ultra Float, we have a micro switch instead of the full metal contacts. There'd be more for like some pumps, lower duty applications with the micro switch in there. They're a little more cost effective, but then if you want to jump up into the Relion small, the RS, which is 13 amps, or the Relion large, which is 15 amps, any one of them you go into, if you scroll down to the bottom, we have what's called configurators, and you just make selections. There's a little green arrow here telling you, hey, click on me. I want the 13 amp. Okay, do I want a medium angle, which has like a 40-degree activation angle? Or do you want a wide angle, which is kind of standard for pump switches, 90-degree total switching differential? So let's pick the 90-degree. And then you pick your mounting method, whether you want pipe clamp, stainless steel, or the rubber locks, or the cast iron weight, plastic weight, or no mounting method at all. Let's just say rubber locks. And then if you scroll down more, you just keep clicking until there's no more options available. So you can get it with bare leads, and then you can use it 120 or 240 on it. Or you can do a 120 volt piggyback or 240 volts. Let's take the 120 volt piggyback. That's kind of standard. And you pick your cable length. And as you're clicking these options down on the bottom, it's building your model number and your description. And then once you're all done, it'll give you a price too, list price. So you got that. Now do you want a bagged or box? Let's pick box. Okay, so now there's our total list price. And then the product number and the model number and the full description. And then you can share this or download it. There's a little tiny total box over here. It's not checked, but if you click on it and then you click download, it'll open up a PDF. And the PDF, oh, I guess it doesn't share it well to anybody watching remotely, but here's a little PDF here. And it'll give you a total on the bottom, and it'll show you all the options you've selected. But sometimes you don't want to share that total, so you just leave that total box disconnected. Everything else showed up, right? Yep. Okay. All right.
So can you search for a 24627?
Yes. 24627. So that's Ultra pump switch. And yeah, you can use our search box up there, and it pre-selects everything for you. That's 15 amp, Ultra pump switch, wide angle, pump up, normally closed, pipe clamp, stainless steel, 120 volt with piggyback, and it's boxed.
So that's poly one?
Yep.
Yeah.
All of our floats are poly now.
Okay.
Yep. All right, and then some other pump floats we have available. We have our Double Max, which in the coming weeks is getting an update as well. We are going to, in the past, we've used our Unimax float switch on it. I see the new one has our Ultras on it, but we're doing an even bigger upgrade with a different power box relay in there. And we're going to have like color-coded collars that slip over the top of the float. So there'll be a red and a green. So you can tell that's where the pump stops, whether it's pump up or pump down. You know, if you can just imagine when the green, you know, whether the green's on top or down below, when the green is activated, it'll turn the pump on. When the red is activated, it'll turn the pump off. And then we have our vertical pumps, float switches, good for some pits. And we have specialty pump switches. So this is our Surface Max here. You can get it without a bracket or with a bracket. We private label for Shermy Pump, and they are the ones who kind of introduced or asked us to get this bracket to get it up off the ground a little bit more. So it's a little more adjustable, and there's actually screws on the bottom where you can adjust that bracket up and down too. Without the bracket, it's like 1/32 or 1/16 of an inch. With the bracket, it's 1/2 inch that'll turn off and 1.5 inches that'll turn on. So this is designed to piggyback into a pump float, or you could hardwire it if you want, like for floor sucking pumps, or you know they use theirs on mine or whatever. Typically, but you could put it up on a flat rooftop or a parking garage and automate your manual floor sucking pump. And then we have our quick pack, which is a control switch mounted to control box, a junction box basically, with a power relay in there. So now we can handle up to 25 amps for a pump control. We are also, oh, I didn't bring, I did. In the future, we are also going to have a 20 amp piggyback for our pump switches available. That's what these would look like. You got the different NEMA type cord set. This is our current 230 volt, current 120 volt, and we'll have a 20 amp version as well. Like those. But in the meantime, if you just want pump control at 25 amps, you need to use our quick pack. And we have some other accessories, plug-in lapse time meters, bank cones, things like that. And then we have our power post section here. I don't recall you guys ever using our power post, but
It's like a system control panel with a power post.
okay.
Like 5505 or something.
Yeah, so that's, I think that is one of this, is it not? Similar.
Yeah,
It's not like these.
yeah, it's more like the third one. over
Yeah,
there.
yeah. So, in our power post lineup, we have our mini and standard here, which are pretty simple. Our mini is basically just a junction box on a 5x5 PVC fence post, which lets you put that out by your septic tank, do all your wiring, and that's it. And then we have our standard here. This one has terminal blocks and power, zoom in a little more. So we have separate terminal blocks for incoming power and for your float, and an auxiliary output, so you can get audible and visual notifications right outside and or indoors. So if you use the auxiliary port, you can get the indoor alarm or the outdoor alarm or both. There's a little toggle switch to turn off the outdoor alarm if you don't want to see it outdoors. So that has LEDs built into it, and then a buzzer as well. And then if you go back to our monitoring series, we have two models here. The first one is Demandos. And with this has a OLED display on it and menu structure here. So you can do a lot of things with this. This gives you lapse time, event counts, pump run indication. This has multicolor LEDs, so green LEDs when the system is normally a power to your alarm circuit. When the pump is running, there's blue LEDs that flash. On the display, it'll tell you how long the pump has been on, how many amps it's drawing, how many cycles it's run. And then we also have average amp draw of the last 10 cycles, maximum amp draw of the last 10 cycles, minimum amp draw of the last 10 cycles, and then your last count and duration and all that, and then total counts. And then there's several other options you can do with this one. I actually have a PowerPoint that I'll breeze through just on this in a little bit here. And this is kind of what was a baseline for our flex control panel system. So this is Demandos 120 or 230 volt. And they all come with a female receptacle on the inside of the post, so you can just plug your pump right into it, or your piggyback float and then your pump. And then the other option here is a model that can do time dose or demand dose. So there's a little power relay in there. We've never had to replace a power relay, but we did design it. There's one screw in there. So if the power relay ever does go bad, then just one screw to take it out, put a new one in and replace it. We did the math and it should last like 27 years or something for a normal household doing 5 pump cycles a day, things like that. So our power post monitoring series, and as well as our baseline one, has inputs for high level float alarm and also a filter switch. So here's a filter switch, which you just drop in your filter if you use filters in this area. And then if the filter gets clogged up, the liquid level rises. There's a little float in here that rises up and makes a connection. and it'll give you an alarm saying, hey, come out and clean your filter off, homeowner. So this has separate power inputs. On the bottom right is your pump power, and then on the top right is your alarm power. If they only have one line of power coming in, you can splice it and run it off one. However, if your pump trips a breaker, you're not going to have alarm control, not going to get an alarm indicator.
Do you use control floats with that, or you'd have to use a piggyback?
You can do either or with the time dose version. So we have it set up, you can do a lot of different things with the time dose version. You can get a low level redundant off alarm. You can use a piggyback for that situation, because when you use control floats for all of the circuits on the left there, so you'd have a timer enable float, a peak timer enable float. So if the timer enable isn't keeping up on the normal demand on your timer settings, and then if it gets up to that peak timer, you can have more aggressive pumping cycles, dosing cycles going out. And then you can also have a high level alarm. And in the middle of those two terminal blocks are auxiliary outputs. And I don't want to get too far into this because the PowerPoint's going to go over a lot of that. But yeah, so you can use either if you're using it for a demand dose system, you can do the piggyback or the control circuit. And in time dose, you have to use the control switches, which are more cost effective. But then if you want that redundant off float, that is a piggyback pump float, because the full load amps have to go through that. All right. And then we have accessories for that. Right now it shows our riser connection kits. Those are our old ones. Our new ones look like this. So you have your cable organizer here. You got labeled for pumps, your pump cable, your pump switch, your control switch, and then on the back, if you do have a filter switch, you just drill out a cable slot for that. And then this just twists on. There's a little gasket here. Put it up through the bottom of the post, push it through the riser, and then you screw it on to get it nice and snug, right like that. After you put all your cables through, here's a little gasket that seals it all off. The nut here is kind of concave to go with the riser, the shape of the riser. That's a 2.5 inch version. We also have a 2-inch version. For the concrete tanks are typically 2 inches, so works good for that. And so control panels, we have a ton of different varieties of control panels. Our two lowest cost ones are the go-to control panel, and then our AP panels. I have a sample of our AP panel. Let's bring that. So simple test silent switch on the bottom, or on the right side, and a buzzer and a beacon, lockable latch. You can get it with or without a control breaker, and then you have your pump breaker in there. You have the relay there. Lapse time meter, vent counter, pump run indicator, handoff auto switch. Just real simple, easy to use, easy to connect, and pretty low cost.
Do you guys have anyone requiring a cycle count or any of that?
On occasion,
It's not like per jurisdiction or anything like that.
no, we don't stock up with the timer or a counter.
You do not.
Not normally. If we go into that, there's some limited options for that. You can do 120 or 230, and then single phase, you can get it with the hardwired, with it lapse time meter and the vent counter, and these are all good up to 20 amps. So let's just say, yeah, we want both the lapse time meter and the vent counter 120 volt. You can do a 2-inch terminal adapter and lock nut, which is shipped loose, separate, and that just goes on the bottom of the panel. They just drill their own hole. This is rated 4X for outdoor use. We can't install the lock nut unless we bought like a $100 4X rated plug, but then that just increased the cost a lot, too much. So we ship it loose, and then you just drill your 2-inch hole in the bottom, and then hook it up to your conduit. You can also get it with a 2 foot or a 4 foot pedestal, and that's measured from the bottom of the panel to the top of the base of the post, the pedestal. So let's say we do that. You can get it with alarm floats, cable weights or pipe clamps, 20 foot or 15 foot. And you can do your control switches, you can do wide angle or narrow angle, depending on how quickly or how much pumping range you want. If you want just a real narrow angle pumping range, if you want to do kind of micro doses out to your field, you can pick the narrow angle. Or if you want a wider angle, get more volume out at a time, you pick that. We'll do the narrow angle 15 foot. And there you go. So you get your list price there. A little farther. That's kind of what that looks like for everybody remotely. And then right now we still list our suspension probe control panel. That's kind of a legacy product that is going to be replaced by our Flex panel. We have our Flex Clean Water Systems panel up here, which I have a example of that on the table up there. We have our Flex Wastewater panel, intrinsically safe panels, aerobic. We're going to be coming out with new aerobic panels, which are going to use our Flex board and all that. So we're going to be able to do a lot of different things with aerobic treatment, with your compressor failure, whether you're monitoring your based off voltage or current or air pressure. So you're going to be able to get a lot of data with all that stuff. Our oil alert for elevator sump pits. So we do have our most popular one, which is the plug and play one. And with this one, we just have a female receptacle on the bottom here. Zoom in a little different. Scroll down. Scroll down. Oh, okay. So anyway, there's a female receptacle on the bottom here where you plug your pump into, and then you just plug in the control panel to a 120 volt AC outlet. There you go. And then that has a separate indoor alarm if you want. You can get the alarm right on the panel or separately. And then it has a preset oil and water sensor there. So it has 3 probes. The bottom probe, once the liquid comes up, that is just kind of telling, that's the off probe. So the liquid would keep rising. If something conductive like water touches the second probe, that would turn your pump on to pump out any water you have in your system. And if it keeps rising hits a third probe, you get your high water alarm. If it keeps going up and the float comes up, that's your high oil alert. If the probes are not contacting water, because oil is non-conductive and water is conductive. So we know that when it floats up and there's no continuity between the top probe and the other reference point, that there would be an oil slick on the top. And if it's not, that means it's still water, so just keep pumping it out. And we do have options on all of our oil alerts now, where you can hook up the oil alert right to a fire suppression system, which is becoming a big thing now. So the fire suppression system, if you hook it up into the contacts there, if you have a fire in the building, it's going to ignore the oil and it's just going to pump out the liquid, because that's what engineers and everybody wants done. So you can keep that enabled or disable it, whatever you want to do.
Ben was mentioning that we realize that with Liberty, they've got the prepackaged system for these elevator pumps. They make this for Liberty. You could, in theory, reach out and get this a la carte for a considerable price break. Maybe it's worth the effort, maybe not, but something to think about. So.
Wrong button.
No company.
Sorry. I clicked there. Yeah. There we go. All right. Okay, and then we also have our check it control panel here. That's kind of our standard one. You can see the continuity of all your floats, and I have an example of that up on the table. I do want to switch to the camera for anybody remote. Just kind of go over that quick.
This is the panel we start.
Yeah, here's our standard check it, and pretty much all of our products have undergone a revamp over the last 3 years. And this is our redesigned checkerboard. We have HOA switches here. So there's your hand mode. It flashes when the pump is running every few seconds. And then you can turn your pump off or put it in automatic and have it run via the floats. So we have your low level or your off float coming up. Your lead float comes up, turns the pump on. You have pump run indicators here. Pump 1 is on. It gives you the status of each float, whether it's closed or open. Your leg float comes on, pump 2 and 1 are both on because they're both in automatic. And you can adjust this to alternate or always start pump 1 first or always start pump 2 first. And then you have the red indicator. So we have a high level alarm. As it all comes down, they all turn on. There's also a couple other little different configurations you can do here just by holding the button, and it'll be in the documentation. With the green light that's always on, if you don't want to see that, you can hold the configure button down and turn that off. Some people don't want to see it. If it's right outside a bedroom window or something. Pretty much all of our control panels and alarms now have these quick connect terminal blocks and connection points. So this you can get with our IEC magnetic contactors, or you can do with a little more low cost, like a power relay version. These also have lockable latches. And then a lot of our control panels, if we go back to the website, have an opaque door or a clear door option. I'm just going to check out our check it control panel. So let's say we want single phase simplex, click on that. And all of them are rated 4X, but you can use them indoors as well, type 1. So here's with the opaque door. So all of these are opaque doors. You just select on the bottom whether you want the standard voltage, or if you want it with overloads, or if you need it with a capacitor, mounts available in there. So if you just want the standard IEC contactor only, you pick that. And then you go through the configurator here. So you just pick your amp range, pick any enclosure size upgrades you want. And this also allows you to pick more options. If you don't need any other options, you can just pick no other options, and it gives you the base enclosure size. But if you do need some options, I would recommend picking the biggest enclosure size to get all of the options available and see which ones you need. And say, okay, I need a lapse time, an anti-condensation heater, and then from there go down in size to see if they're still available. Yep, still available. So keep going down, yep. Just to get the best price. It's going to be lower cost, the smaller enclosure you get. So lapse time and anti-condensation are still both available. And this one they're not, so we have to go back to the 12-10-6, and there we go. Then you pick how many control switches you want, whether you want 3 or 4 or none. And then high level or no, low level. And then your pipe clamp, your cable feet, and you're all done. So now we'll go through one of the PowerPoints real quick. Does anyone want a quick refresher or want to know the difference between a pump float and control float in more detail? I have like a 100-page PowerPoint on that. Should we go through that a little bit? I know we're limited on time. Yep, that one. We'll try to breeze through it. I did this for a CEU credit class in Wisconsin, and it's supposed to be an hour long, but we're definitely not going to make it an hour long. All right, well, one of these,
I don't think I should click.
okay, I'll just point to you.
You know, next.
All right,
Or whatever.
okay. So slides, yeah, there's 89 slides. So we got pump switches, control switches, the different angles. We have narrow, medium, and wide angle. Different styles. There's normally open or pump down, and then normally close or pump up, or normally open, normally closed 3-wire switch, which you could use for either. Talk about attachments and mounting, tethering and pumping ranges, different cables, applications like time dose or demand dose, system configurations, and then other styles like high temp, vertical, surface, quick pack, double max, and then some troubleshooting. So next. So pump and control switches next. So this is like a sump pit model or a diagram. You have your pump float on the bottom and your control switch up top. Your control float would be connected to an indoor alarm. So that's more low amps, like up to 5 amps for that. And then your pump float carries a full load amps of your pump up to 15 amps with our current floats. And you'll see on the left there's a piggyback. It's piggybacked in series with your pump into the receptacle. So next. On the left, and these are our old pump switch and control switch models, our big switch and our Unimax. So on the left is our big switch that has metal contacts, which can take on those full load amps of the pump. And technically it would work for a limited time with a control circuit, but over time there would become a residue that would build up over those metal contacts that would eventually stop allowing that to work. But it would work in a pinch for a short duration on a control circuit if you wanted to connect it to alarm, but I wouldn't recommend it. And then on the right, we use a micro switch up in here, and we have a 5 amp or 1 milliamp rated contact. And so those cannot take the full load amps of the pump. So if you connect those to your pump, you're going to get a short circuit. And here's a little different look at the metal contacts on the left. And on the bottom left, there is actually the new micro switch that we're using. It's a 21 amp rated micro switch that we are now using in our ultra pump float switches. And we're rating it to 13 amps. So we're derating it a little, but it will actually handle the full load amps of the pump. But if you do want something a little more robust, you get the Relion, which is the full metal contacts that'll handle that big inrush of current a lot better. And then on the right, a couple different micro switches. On the bottom right is the 1 milliamp, our gold control switch, which can control a lot lower amp circuits, and as well as DC voltage. Okay, next up. So pump switch, using a pump switch in a control circuit, they work at first. I kind of already covered this. Next one. And so your pump switches directly control the pump, usually rated between 13 and 15 amps. Typically have a wide angle switch activation, which we'll go over real shortly. And your pumping range is increased by your tether length, which we'll also go through. You can have a pipe clamp mounted, or you can do sometimes, typically not, but sometimes you could use a cable weight on a pump switch, but typically they're almost always pipe clamp mounted. Piggyback or bare leads for pump switches. So if you see a piggyback on a float, it has to be a pump switch. It cannot be a control switch. All right, typically they're pumped down, but they can now be pumped up. Here's the internal looking, or the internals of our Relion on the top left. We have different collars in there. We have the same housing for our narrow, medium, and wide angle float switches, but then we put different collars in there so that metal ball in there either has to drop down and climb up over the ridge to give us a wide angle, or narrow angle, or medium, or we put both collars in, or one collar on the other side. And I wish I would have brought one open with me. But it just determines the activation angle. And then on the bottom left, we have with the micro switch, and the same principle there. We have different collars to get the activation angles. Just kind of gives you pictures on the right. Okay, next slide. Control switches, they control alarm or control panels. They have a lower amp rating, typically a narrow angle activation, and a fixed tether length. length. And the pumping range is increased by distance between your start and your stop, because you, on a control float, you have a start and a stop versus one typically. Next step, bare leads always, so you'd never have a payback. And that's the internal lookings of that. So here's activation angle. So narrow angle is approximately 10 degrees above and below horizontal. So deactivate and activate. So there's a pretty narrow range you get. Medium angle is between 40 and 50 degree activation. So you got about 40 degrees up and down. And then the wide angle is 90 degrees. So you got you're off and you're on, or if it's pumped up, it'd be reversed. Okay, next one. So narrow angle, like I said, typically around 20 degrees total differential, 10 degrees below and 10 degrees up. And it's a 3-inch tether. So I let me grab one of those. Yeah, black. Yeah. Okay. So control float, you typically measure 3.5 inches, and that would be your tether point, whether it's on a cable weight or tethered with your rubber locks or your stainless steel pipe clamp, and that's just where it's set. And then depending on where it activates, this is a pump switch, and it should be wide angle. Yep, this is a wide angle. So you can kind of hear that ball click here, which is about 45 degrees above horizontal. And then as it comes down, it deactivates about 45 degrees. So you got total 90 degree differential, but with the tether here, that's your off here and your on's here. That's only a couple inches of activation angle. So next slide, with the 45 degree angle, back up one please. Yep. So 3.5 inches of tether would actually give you 4.5 inches of pumping range. So you'd have 4.5 instead of 2.5. And then your next, you get that full 7.5 from there to there. This is a wide angle switch. So that's off and on. That's about 7 inches or 7.5. Okay, then next. So we have a normally closed. So normally closed means as the float is hanging by gravity, it's down. The internal mechanism in there, whether it's the metal contacts or the micro switch in there, if it's normally closes while it's hanging, that means there's power able to flow through there. The circuit is closed. So right now that's closed. If it's an alarm control switch, your alarm would be going off, so that would be used as a low-level alarm. If it is used on a control panel, that could be your redundant off float switch. Or on a well system, as your holding tank drops down, it then closes that circuit and then tells your pump to fill that tank back up again. When you have normally open float switches, as it's hanging down, the circuit's open. So then when it rises up, it closes, then activating a high-level alarm. Or like on a well system, you get, well, that would be your high-level alarm. Your tank is full, shut off my pump, things like that. And in a sewage application with the pump switch, right now, so it's open now, but as your sewage container is filling up, now it closes, and then it turns your pump on to pump that liquid level down, and then it'll reopen, turns the pump off, opens the circuit. So the normally open, normally closed one, yeah, you can go to the next slide. Actually, next one. So this is a normally open, this is normally closed, or no, sorry, this is normally open. The red indicates that the circuit is open, so nothing's flowing through it, and as it tips up, now that closes the circuit. Okay, next slide. All right, so here is our 3-wire switch. So I'm gonna get a little closer here. On the bottom left here, you have a couple different circuits, and this circuit is your common wire. So that one is connected to one of your wires coming out of the backside of your float. And there's a little lever here that either touches this contact or this contact. When it's touching this contact, you can use both of these wires, and as it's hanging down, it's gonna be normally closed. But if you use your common wire and your outside blue wire, as it's hanging down, it's gonna be normally open, because that circuit is open. And then as it tips up, that lever or switch in there goes from the top contact down to the other one. So depending on which wire you use, you can actually just stock one float in your truck and use it for either application. Okay.
So it's bare lead only, 15 amp?
I forget, I know we removed a couple of models. See the 13 or 15, we can look at the website afterwards, yes. We used to offer the whole range, but limited it a little bit for something, but we can do it in both pump and control switch. Yep. Okay, so next up. Next slide. Next slide. Oh, okay, here's some animations actually. So if you click on that and start it. Right click. No. Oh, go to the next one. These animations may not work. Try clicking in. Shoot. All right. Well, I can share a copy of this PowerPoint with anyone, and then I'm not sure why it's not working right now. Maybe it has to be downloaded, and I think we just opened it, or one or the other. But there's this animation. If you click play, the float will go up, and then you can see the ball rolling, and then it would turn red or green, and then the liquid level would rise or come down, rise or fall. Okay, so next up, there's a few of our different attachments. Next slide. There's our cable bracket. We have in the 3 float, a 4 float, or a 6 float. That's a 4 float shown in the middle. 3 on the left top, 4 on the left middle, and 6 on the left bottom. And then float switch mounting just shows you different mounting methods, the pipe clamp, the external weighted. Okay, next up. So here's that tether point we're talking about with the external weight. You mount your weight and you just slide your weight up or down depending on how much tether you want. Because I guess I'll demonstrate a little more. The longer tether you have, that 90-degree, let's see where that deactivation is here. So right there, so that's maybe 2 feet. So from here to here, that's probably about a 2-foot activation angle. But if I pull that tether back, when the deactivation here to here, that's only 9 inches or something like that. So the tethering determines your activation angle, and so does your pivot point with your external weight.
Are you guys finding more contractors using the weights, or are they always, is it tying them, or?
Usually to the float tree, PVC float tree or something with clamps.
Yeah.
It's most common discharge pipe.
So not as often using the weights?
Not as often.
Here's a tethering guide that kind of tells you, based on how far you have your tether out, whether if it's 3 inches and it's a narrow angle, well, we're saying that's not available. 3 inches and a medium angle. So if you tether at 3 inches, medium angle float switch would be a 3.5 inch pumping range. So over here on the left. If it's 3.5 inches at a wide angle, that's a 7-degree range. And if you go over, let's say 10 inches, let's go back down to 8 inches because it has not rated for the medium angle. So at 8 inches, it'd be 5 inches at medium angle or 11.5 at wide angle. And the next slide. So this is the control switch. So typically we recommend the control switches to be at 3.5 inches. But if you do want to get a little bit different activation angle with a narrow, medium, or wide, and a tether length, there's a graph for that to show you how much tethering you'll get. So this talks about variable length for your pump range, and then fixed for control switches typically. Just kind of shows the activation angle and how much, how many inches of pumping range you would get. Okay, next up. That's a 7-inch tether, which is 3.2 to 12.25 inches. And then talking about the cable, so we use SJOOW. Most of the competitors use SJOW. So that's the rating of the cable itself. The extra O in there is the inner and outer jackets. So inside here on this other control switch, you can actually see this one. So on this one, there's jacketed cables inside the other cable. So all of these jackets are oil resistive. So this is the better cable. And then inside the little cable here is strands of wire. So the strands that we have, I think ours are like 168, 162 strands. So the more strands you have, the more flexible the cable is, which is great for when it's cold outside, because cables get pretty stiff. So that just kind of talks about the cable standards. It conducts better and maintains more flexibility even in colder weather. The S stands for service, J is junior, the first O is oil resistance inner sheathing, second O is oil resistant outer sheathing, and then the W is water resistant as well. It's a kind of thermoplastic cable, meaning they have a tough rubber jacket covering their interior copper wires. All right, next slide. Just kind of talks about the different gauges of wire or cable. So you got 14 gauge is sometimes 16 or even 12 gauge, and then you have control switch is 18 gauge cable. Next up. So if you look at, compare the cable or pump switch and the control switch, you will see they're a little bit thicker or not as thick, depending on what type of cable or how many amps it draws as well. So this is a 16 gauge wire, and then this would be 18 gauge. And then, like I said, you can get all the way down to 12 gauge for the higher amp cables. All right, this kind of shows the internal mechanisms of the piggyback float. So if you're ever doing a continuity test to check a piggyback float, you'd always put your probe in the back port nearest the cable and in the front prong nearest the cable, because the electricity would flow down into the float and come back up and out. And then the ground just goes straight through, and so does the common neutral wire. And control floats can be used for 120 or 230 volt, or even low voltage AC if you get our gold plated contact one. And the bare lead pump floats can be used for 120 or 230 volt applications. However, the piggyback models are voltage dependent based on the plug configuration. Okay, next step. So there are two common applications for float switches. You have your demand dose or your time dose. Next slide. So demand dose, and probably the next 30 or 40 slides will skip, and I'll just kind of give a demonstration, I guess. Let me grab that one of those floats back. Okay, demand dose means that in a normal sewage application, we'll say we use a wide angle control or pump float, and when the float comes up, the circuit closes, your pump comes on demand. So right now it's saying pump turn on. When it comes down, pump turns off. So on, off activation. On a time dose system, you'll have a timer enable float. So when the float comes up, it closes circuit, but the pump doesn't start right away. It goes through, and there's mechanical or digital timers, and based off those time settings, you'll typically let the system rest for a predetermined amount of time, maybe 3-4 hours. So even though the circuit is closed, the pump is not running. Once that 3 or 4 hours has elapsed, then the system will turn on and start the pump for 3 or 4 minutes, or it depends on your system, it has to be engineered. I would say typical is like 2.5 minutes, something like that. And then it pumps liquid down, and then once that time has elapsed, if the pump float is still in the closed position, the contacts are still closed and current is still possibly or is flowing through there, the pump's still not gonna run because it's now gonna go back into that rest period of 4 hours. And now once your 4 hours is elapsed, it continues pumping down. And now when the control, or when the pump flow, or control flow, I guess, typically on a time dose system, when that drops down and it closes, or sorry, opens that circuit where no power can flow through it, the pump would shut off. However, with some of the digital time dose features, you can actually run out that entire time if you choose. So, hope that wasn't too complicated. And when you want to go to the next slide, or slide show, actually. We're running out of time here and want to have a couple minutes for questions.
Level control? Level monitoring, I should say.
Level monitoring. So our flex panel here, you can use float switches or transducers on it, or a combination of transducer with low level redundant off float and a high level float. And with this, if you're using a transducer, you can get the level. Yes. So you just program in which transducer you're using, and then the depths, your ons, your offs, and alarm levels, and then it'll tell you what level it's at in feet or inches or whatever. And so let's, how about the other slide switch or slide? Okay, on-site pumping system monitoring. Just gonna breeze through this quick, look at some graphics. So this is mainly for our power post system, but in the end it gets onto our flex control panel. So this just shows a typical installation. You got wires exposed, your outlet box is open to the weather. You have multiple boxes kind of connected there. It's kind of a mess. You have your plumber's putty in there, just mounted on a 4x4, or a separate alarm mounted on top of the box. But there's better options. We're saying this is nice, clean, sleek looking power post with everything in it. Excuse me. Here's the internals where you have your piggyback pump float and your pump cable, and then your female receptacle, and they go down into your riser. Here's just an overview look at it on a live site. There's your piggyback connections. So you can do demand dose or time dose with one of our power posts. Here's just a quick overview of different parts and pieces of it. Kind of covered that a lot. Wiring diagrams. Talks about lapse time and event count. This kind of goes over some of the LED indicators and the things that would be displayed on the screen. You'd have your high level would be a red LED. Your pump run would be blue. Your green is your system normal. Red high level. Amber or yellow would be filter alarm. The red and blue would be extended pump run alarm. So with this, you can go in and say, if you know your system's normally supposed to run for 2.5 minutes, you can go in there and set an extended run time. Let's say 4 minutes you establish, or even 3 minutes. That means if your pump ever runs longer than that, it shouldn't, there's something wrong with it. Maybe your discharge pipe broke and it's just recirculating in on itself, or your check valve broke, so it pumps it up, but then it comes back down and then it has to pump a little bit extra out next cycle. You would get your extended pump run alarm, and then you could come and check out your system and fix it before you had a major failure. There's a high amp setting you can go in and change. So all of our power posts are rated up to 15 amps, but if you're running a 7.8 amp pump, you can establish maybe half an amp higher than that. So if it ever starts drawing 8.3 amps or whatever you want to put in there, you would get a high amp alarm, and that would be good. Maybe the impeller's clogged or something like that. Or at the end of a pump cycle, as pumps age, their windings start to break down and they start to draw higher amps. So you could get an early pump warning failure, basically. And then also the blue would be the pump run. We also have like a indigo or a white one for, forget what those are for. I don't show these here. Just kind of goes into it. And then it also goes into showing you if you have power losses. You can go in here if you want and establish how many gallons per minute your system pumps out. And then we can do a totalization, tell you how many gallons you pumped for your system. Just kind of goes through diagrams and how it works and how to calculate drawdown. You can do a drawdown test to see how many gallons per minute your system actually draws. Extended pump run, high, you can set your high amp levels. It's the menu structure. We have a resettable history and a lifetime history. So the lifetime history, all of the stats stay in there for the lifetime of the panel. The resettable history, you can go in there and let's say you change out your pump, maybe your pump failed, you could go into the pump run stats and reset just your pump stats. And then you can get all your stats moving forward for your new pump, but all of your other stats would stay in there. So each level you can reset separately, but we offer you extended pump stats, high amp stats, pump float stats, high level stats, filter stats, pump fail stats, and power loss stats. And then in each of those, we show you the last cycle, the average of the last 10, and then the highest of the last 10, your lowest of the last 10, things like that. So here's just more diving into the menu system a little bit more. So we did a case study. It's a pretty cool case study, but I'm kind of running really low on time. But basically, we use our system to show that, hey, there's a problem with the system. We're able to check it out, and they had a faulty check valve. Time renewals. This kind of goes into time dose and talking about a removable relay, peak dose, things like that. So here's now comparing our power post to our flex control panel. Our flex can do everything our power post can do, plus a lot more. You can go into 3-phase, you can do duplex systems, you can do our Wi-Fi or Zigbee or cellular. And there's a bunch of different menu systems as well. Oh, I forgot about this. This is a newer feature on our power post. We actually have like a pump calendar on there, so it'll show you your current week. It gives you 7 digits. So in the current week, it'll show you the last 7 days. Let's say there's a 7 on the front of this left slot. That means your system ran 7 times that day. The next slot over would be 6 days ago, and so on. And then it'll give you your last week, your current week, your current month. So there's only 4 digits there, so it gives you a 1 week view. So maybe you have 38 in 1 week, 40 in the next week, and then 100 the week after that. So that could let you dial in. Well, why did I have extra pump cycles that day? And you're asking, how do we show you 48 when you have 1 digit? Well, if it flashes a number, then it's showing you more than the single digit. So it'll just stay solid, like a solid 7, or it'll be 2, 4, and it's like a 2-second flash. So 2, 4 would be 24 cycles. Then I'll show you the last month, and then the last 6 months, and then months 7 through 12 as well. So you can get a lot of data with that and figure out different things of what's going on. So this just kind of shows you what's going on. Here's your last week. Day 7 ran 7 times. The day before 6 times. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Current month, last month, things like that. You can also do hand operation. So you can put your power post or your flex or whatever in the hand mode and pump your tank empty or pump it full, I guess, in a well application, tank fill application. And then you can deactivate it. For sewage applications, you would want to do that drawdown, empty your tank so you can service your pit out. It just kind of goes in how to do that. You can enable or disable the buzzer on the power post. And then here's the flex, talking about the super bright LEDs and the viewing angle, elapsed time, your HOA switch, your navigation scroll wheel, your float configurations. You you can really do a lot of programming with the Flex. You can program different inputs, what they do, how many floats you want to use. There's data logging with all that. You can change your password. On the Flex, there's a setup wizard, so it'll go in there and ask you, are you doing time dose? Are you doing demand dose? Do you want to enable or disable your transducer? Do you want a 2-float backup? Do you want to enable or disable your low-level alarm float? And this talks about our Wi-Fi, Zigbee, or cellular. Kind of goes through all that, how to attach the antenna that comes with, and things like that. This is kind of talks about where I said 1,000 feet, you can get 8,000 feet. So you have your hub here, and then you can get 1,000 feet to one panel, next panel, next panel. So you can go 8,000 feet as long as you have 8 panels out there. Just kind of showing you that. There's a system you log in. If you're a contractor, you can have multiple sites or panels or systems on your login screen. So this is an example. We have a busy alarm, which would be just the alarm hooked up, just kind of for testing. We have a busy hub, which is connected to a panel of some sort. And then we have our Flex panel, which is just connected directly. And then we have our busy viewer, which is, actually that wording has changed. That's now the busy notifier, that bigger panel back there. And then if you're a contractor, you could have service contracts for every one of your residences that you service. And you can rename all of these. You could say, 1025 Hartford Street in whatever city, and you can go in there and program in notes like, hey, this is John Doe, here's your telephone number, and all their settings you can adjust remotely on the website or within the app. You can adjust a lot of things. Shows you your device status, whether or not it's connected to your server, your signal strength, your buzzer status, whether your buzzer is enunciating or not. If your buzzer is going off, if you have an alarm, you can actually remotely silence that. Gives you your pump status, if you have an extended run alarm, or if you have your auxiliary cutout, fail safe in there, we can have it cut off your pump. If your seal fail is activated or your thermal is activated. With our Flex system, if you're over current, we can also deactivate your pump there. So it's kind of, we can't market it as an overload protection, but use your imagination. Or undercurrent as well. And then you can also hook up our little floor water spotter systems to that. So if you have a leak, you could shut your pump off too. So our Flex system can pretty much do everything and tell you if your pump failed. So if we say, hey, voltage should be going to your power relay, but guess what? We're not finding any amps. That means your pump has failed. So we can give you pump fail notifications as well. And then we have different stats. On the top, there's different tabs. Here's a pump 1 status, and we have your different counts, resettable value, lifetime value, and then it tells you last time it was updated. So you have run times, average times, max times, things like that. Up on top, you have seal alarms, high water alarms, over undercurrents, a lot of different data points. You can go in and set up, you can configure, how long you want your dose on and off times to be, things like that. We have a thing called pump exercising. So you could say, hey, every 10 days, if your pump hasn't run, just run it for 3 seconds, something like that. Good for like vacation homes where nobody's up there for 3 months at a time, just so it doesn't seize up. Maybe once a month, run it for a couple seconds. Okay, tried to get all that in, and I think I just made it. Any questions? There's so much information. These pamphlets here, one of them talks about our Flex, our busy site, our wireless stuff. And then the other one is kind of our basic, like on-site controls, things like that. I have a lot more I can leave with you guys, and you can pass them out to contractors or outside sales guys or whatever.
How much contractor interest are you guys seeing in all this remote Wi-Fi, this and that, the way of the future? You get a lot of requests for people to be able to monitor their pumps from their phones and whatnot, or?
Yeah, there's more all the time, no doubt.
Yeah.
A lot of it's got to do with where your Pat, got a lot of them in Wyoming that, we're talking people who are 15 miles of dirt road.
Super remote, yeah.
You know, helicopters get their service guys in, and those service guys really like that remote access feature, but the average guy in Yellowstone County, it's not necessary.
Sure.
There's some interest because people just like as much control over their life as they can on their phone.
Yeah, but yeah, you see these people that can control their whole home, or, you know, the shades, you name it, and everything.
Why they think they need to know every time their pump turns on. Be a person I've got.
Peace of
better
mind, I
things to do in my life,
suppose.
But there's more of that interest out, but the more remote areas like out in the middle of Wyoming and eastern Montana, we do get more requests from the contractor out there.
Mhm. Fair enough. Yeah, it feels like every few months we get a new feature that's tied into the Wi-Fi, this and that. I think that at the very end, you hit on the exercising of the pumps. When we were talking about stagnation, that's what kills all these pumps. If that alone is all you can sell on, is just the fact that you can exercise these pumps every week or whatever month, just to make sure that they're still working for that time lapse when they're not at the homes, if it's a remote, vacation home or a remote something. That seems to be a big enough feature that people actually key in on. A lot of the other bells and whistles, yeah, they're great. Some people care, some don't, like you're saying, but that's kind of where I found people taking more interest, is being able to exercise the pumps. As soon as they learn that a pump that doesn't run for 6 months is probably not going to run month 7 when you need it. They usually learn that the hard way, but